Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you from, you know where I am. I'm in Accra, and it's business and life as usual. And I'm really excited, and I say that all the time about my guests, because I really enjoy what I'm doing. This conversation has been many months in the making, and part of the orchestration is via a relationship with other Glocal citizens that were part of a convening. It was called Forge, and it happened last November here in Accra. Brought together creatives, policy folks, and practitioners in the reparative justice space. My guest today is one of those individuals, and flashing back to that time, it was so heartwarming and educational just to understand what reparations really is and what it is meaning for Africans across the continent. And so in that context, I am going to get to her bio and we'll get into her work in reparative justice and human rights. She is a committed activist and professional with a diverse background in human rights law, corporate social responsibility, and international development. Her work has focused on climate justice, peacebuilding, anti-corruption, women's empowerment, youth cooperation, and inclusive societies across Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the MENA region. She's worked in multiple countries and with organizations such as SOS Racism, where she was also a board member, startups and tech companies, the British Council, the Council of Europe, and in April of last year, she joined the advisory board of Pay No Bribe Animators, which is a Sierra Leone-based NGO, and she's now stepping into the role of board chair, furthering her commitment to impactful engagement and advocacy. She is currently the Policy and Advocacy Officer at African Futures Lab, AFA-Lab, an international nonprofit organization supporting racial justice movements in Europe and Africa, with research and developing policy and legal strategies to empower civil society actors and public and private institutions in their fight for justice and reparations. She's currently leading a project on climate reparations, a critical issue at the intersection of racial, climate, and economic justice, which is the locus of a recent AFA-Lab policy paper, Unlocking Climate Reparations, Key Obstacles in the Emergence of a Climate Reparations Framework. Hélène Guimer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Florence, for welcoming me. And thank you for this lovely introduction.
Yes. Well, I wanted to say more, but I was like, let's leave that for the listeners to get into in the conversation, because you have this really broad experience and really interesting career points. So that's something for the show notes, folks. So check those out. And also just further deep diving into this topic. So let's get started where we always do. Where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
Where I'm local? Yes, I'm local in two places. I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal, but I come from Brittany in the northwest part of France. So I'm a French national, and I'm local in those two places. Yeah, and these two places that are really different. Lisbon is a vibrant city with a lot of people, different nationalities, lots of cultural events, and colorful city. And in Brittany, where I grew up, is more quiet, really green, a lot of forest and beautiful also, beautiful coast. So that's the two places that I'm a local. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about where your family's background is from.
Yes, definitely. That's also another place. Yes. My background in my family is originally from Guadeloupe Island in the Caribbean. So it's a French island that is an ex-colony of France. So I'm also a slave descent coming from the Caribbean. Yes.
Which I wanted to ask that because of kind of where reparations sits in your history as well. That's always an interesting thing to understand about the perspective we bring to the work that we do on an everyday basis.
Definitely. This is totally linked to my personal journey as well. Mm-hmm. What I am doing in my job currently and in my activism when I was more young. This is totally linked to the place I come from, where my father come from in Guadeloupe. That is until today is part of France, but it's still a territory where citizens don't have the same rights and conditions than in the rest of the country. So those injustices come from this origin, and make also motivate my will to fight for racial justice.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And so let's go a little bit deeper into the work of your craft now, right? So you mentioned you had activism as a big part of your early years, and then you forayed into other sectors. Let's talk more about your work now at AfriLab and how your craft has been refined and further, focused doing this work in policy advocacy.
So maybe to start somewhere, I would say that my craft is human rights and policy. My journey started when I was still a teenager, so around 15 years old. I started to be an activist for racial justice in France in an organization called Racism, as you said in the introduction. And this have motivated me to study law. I started at law school at the university. I was thinking that I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to defend human rights, and more and more I study law, and I understood that more and more law is unfair.
Right.
Yes, definitely, that's true, and that's why I changed my mind during my law studies, and I didn't want it anymore to be a lawyer, because I think that the lawyer arrives too late in the process, in the sense that if someone come to and need you, it means that this person have already been victim of human rights violation. And in that sense, I was thinking, it's too late. I want to change the things before that people get harmed, before that human rights violation happens. So I chose the path of policy, to try to change policy, to reform policies, and to try to avoid that those human rights violations happen. So that's my craft. Let's say that is what I'm doing until now at African Futures Lab. And before that, I worked on several areas that are touching to women rights, peacebuilding, refugees' rights, youth empowerment, anti-corruption. And now I came back again to racial justice. That was, let's say, my first love, my first involvement, my first commitment. And I'm really happy to be back at this with African Futures Lab, that fight for reparatory justice, reparation from colonial past, colonization and slavery at international level, because we work across Europe and Africa. And that's really something that make me want to work for the lab, is the fact that we tackle racism over the two continents, and racial injustices are rooted in colonialism, and colonialism was linking different continents, especially Europe and Africa, that European countries have colonized the entire African continent. So now racial injustices don't stop at the border of a country. Racism is an international phenomenon. So addressing those issues at international level makes sense, and I think that's what the lab do. And do greatly, so that I'm really happy to be part of this team, and to fight against racial injustices, and at the same time that we link this to other thematic, as you said, we link the intersection of racial injustices with climate injustices, economic injustices, gender injustices, and so we have this approach that is really broad, and highlight how the legacy of colonization impacts all area of the societies today.
Most definitely. And so this is where I typically like to ask kind of why the where of how you came to living and working and playing where you currently are located. But I want to put a little bit of a twist on that. And you started to intimate the genesis of being at the lab and what the lab is focused on. I want to get a sense of where you were and how you all came to put this policy paper together. So it's part of the work that you do, but this particular one at this particular time, what were kind of the guiding forces that brought the work to be presented and be a platform that you're now working from?
Yes, definitely. Okay, I can. So this paper is addressing climate reparation. So our two core areas that we work at the lab are climate and gender. And when I joined the lab, they had already started a bit to work on this topic, but we really, my role when I joined was to go deeper on this thematic for the lab. The first thing that we have analyzed is that there is a lack of expertise on this topic in Africa. Not a lot of people talk about it. There is a lack of knowledge on this topic. Whereas at the same time, that is what is surprising is that there is a thousand and a thousand of organizations in Africa that fight that talk about climate.
Yeah.
You will find 1,000 that are planting trees, raising awareness about the environment, about renewable energy. But when it comes to talk about climate reparations, then there is much less that are here. Still, we hear about climate justice, but reparations is something else. And then we were in the DNA of the lab also. The means that we use for our work are research and advocacy. So it's really in our DNA to do research, and we thought that the first thing to do was to develop a publication where we can, with research, I mean with empirical data and evidence-based data, we can try to put our opinion on this thematic. At the same time that we are analyzing the context and the framework around climate reparations. So, and our goal is really for us to advance the narrative of climate reparations in Africa. So for that, we work on this policy paper where we set up a bit the context. We analyzed the framework that is around climate reparations, legal framework, international law level, UN bodies, and that are around. And at the same time, we were also identifying the challenges that we see for advancing the narrative on climate reparations. And when we had identified all those challenges, we decided to also identify recommendations, what can move forward this narrative. And that was, I think, really important for us to set up the stage at this moment. And we also have identified what are for us the paths or the ways that can really impact the climate reparations in Africa and make this happen one day. So that's how we set up this paper. And from that, it was also for us a way to learn a lot about this context and everything that is around climate reparation until now. And at the same time was also a way to approach people and share knowledge about this and say at the same time, okay, that's the problems, but that's what are the solutions we are proposing, and we believe it is possible.
I want to go to a one-on-one moment because I think that a lot of people hear reparations and, we get it. It's compensation for lost time, lost lives, like lost whatever. And so in the context of what the global legal framework is, because one of the things that I came across recently is that for reparations, particularly in the US context for Black people, another country has to initiate in the international court of whomever the international body is, that is the judiciary arm of reparations, like legislating some kind of global reparations, that another country has to petition for reparations for the people of. So, for example, the US needed an African country to petition for reparations for their lost citizens. And so that might be a different context. But so in terms of the justice system around climate and reparations, what are the mechanisms that will facilitate who pays and how they pay and what meets it all out eventually?
Yes, thank you for this question. The context around climate reparations can be a bit, can have link with what you said, in the sense that what we have identified in this paper as an avenue for seeing one day climate reparation happening is is climate litigations.
Yes.
So that's where the point is. So we believe that we see increasing a number of cases that are going in front of the courts and that are targeting sometimes states, but sometimes corporations. Most of the time, it's also corporations that have perpetrated climate harms, and the thing that is particular with climate reparations and that is different from reparatory justice topic is that climate harms are still ongoing today. We are still plundering the resources in Africa. Global North is still plundering the resources in Africa, destroying lands, forests, grabbing lands with pollution coming in the soil, in the water, and destroying the ecosystem and the environment that impact the health of communities and vulnerable communities. So and this is still happening today. So we are asking reparation for something that is still ongoing. And that's also a way that for us, climate reparation is a way. We see it as a way to stop those harms, in the sense that reparations is not only about money, not at all. It's not only about compensation. When we talk about reparation, we talk about apologize. We talk about cease of the ongoing harms. We talk about a guarantee of non-repetition. We talk about restitution. There is many things that are behind reparations. And that's why in the way we see reparation at the lab, we see people are talking sometimes that reparation is something from the past. It's already passed. Why are you talking? Let's not waste time and energy on something that's happened. Just turn the page and move on. That's what many people think about reparation and how
exactly.
That's a reality. But in the way we see reparation for that can change our present and that can change our future. There is also reparation coming with apologize, coming with reforms also transformation of the current global systems and current global institutions that needs to be decolonized. All those systems have been created during the colonial era and are still until today with the same functioning, putting in place the same mechanisms. So all of this can also take place through reparations and can help to build a better future, a more equal and fair future, more equal relations between the global North and the global South, and change this power of domination that has been initiated through colonization and is still taking place until today through capitalism.
Exactly. Yeah. Which I learned quite a bit about. One thing I didn't mention is that Hélène is a fellow podcaster. And one great compliment to this policy paper is the last season. Was it the last season? The last season of the
Yes.
African Future Labs podcast focused on this topic. So you had several guests that went into the nuance and different regional context, and particularly on the systems context. So tell us a little bit about how you determined the way that you wanted to curate the guests and curate the conversations that you included in that season of the podcast.
Yes, thank you. I'm really happy to talk about this with you today and to share that with the listeners. So we have done, after this policy paper, we really thought that, okay, we need to create knowledge on this topic. Yeah. Okay, so what we decided to do is to do a season of podcast. We did before 2 seasons of podcast that was tackling different thematic, reparatory justice, legacy of colonialism, etc. And then we had this season 3 that is addressing climate reparations. And climate reparations is linked to many different topics. So we had 7 episodes that address different layers, if I can say, of climate reparation. The first one was on tackling climate debts, just to understand why the biggest polluter must pay for climate damage. Where is the responsibility? How it comes from, the accountability of those actors that are states and corporations. that are the responsible of the climate crisis. We know that Africa, the entire continent, is responsible only of 4% of the global gas emissions. This is nothing. Literally nothing. So Africa is not responsible of the climate crisis. We know who is responsible. It's the global north. And at the same time, Africa and other global south regions are really vulnerable, but for the climate crisis. So we first decide to address this, the responsibility of this climate crisis, where it comes from, because it's the roots of climate reparation. If we ask reparation, it's because they are responsible and we are vulnerable because of the harms they have perpetrated. We have other topics that are linked to climate reparation. We address, of course, the international law, regulation, and all the negotiations that are taking place now around the climate issue. Then the loss and damage fund that have been created by the UNFCCC that is now under operationalization. So all these legal frameworks and policy negotiation frameworks that exist around. And when we see that some African advocates have less voice or less listen in those kind of spaces than the one from the global north that are leading the discussion. And that's why we want also, when we advocate for climate reparation, we advocate for a climate justice framework and policies that are African-led for Africa and not led by the global north. We have addressed other topics such as activism, how to be an activist for the narrative of climate reparation. We talk about the media representation that is always addressing these events, or we can see in the news that a hurricane is a hurricane, but no one link it to all the harms that have been done on the planet, and that's also is a consequence of the climate crisis. That's the way the media treat that, is also to make understand that this is a global phenomenon that don't come from nowhere. The rise of the high temperature, the sea level rise, so all those things. And so we talk about also the youth perspective in that, how youth people are really, there is many youth organizations committed for climate justice, because it's their world. I mean, it's what we're gonna let to them. It's important. Exactly. But at the same time, they, in the discussions, they are not represented. Their voice is not listened. And being a young advocate in this framework is complicated, but being a young advocate from Africa is even more complicated. And it's even more difficult to access to those spaces, to be listened. And so that's something that we have addressed there with Ineza Umuoza Grace, that is really a great activist and eco-feminist. We have addressed also topics like the climate finance, because we always think, okay, how it can take place. Climate finance is super important in the way for everyone to understand how it's possible for reparation to take place. We need climate finance, and what we talk about this with Shenai Mukumba, that she's the director of Tax Justice Network Africa, and she was explaining super clearly. It can be something that seems complex, climate finance, and she was explaining many details on how tax can be used to compensate the victims of the climate crisis in Africa, the communities that are the most vulnerable, the communities that have been deprived from their land, the communities that see their land destroyed and the soil polluted, etc. And she was explaining how tax can be used. And she was saying something really clear, that at the abolition of slavery, many European colonizer gave reparations to slave owners. So reparations have already took place in our history. It's just that it's the other side that have been compensated, is the slave owners. And for that, they have used taxes. So nowadays, advocating for reparations for vulnerable communities, victims is possible through taxes. It happened in the history. So she was explaining all of that kind of thing is really, really interesting, and the link with the international financial system, how to totally transform this system of domination that is taking place through capitalism, and all those institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, that are still giving less voice to global South countries. And then we had also a conversation on biodiversity loss, because this is different from climate change.
Right.
Yeah, but this is linked at the same time. That is different, is also linked. And so we had 2 episodes on this that was going more into detail on the challenges, the solution, and also how the biodiversity loss is also linked to, let's say, the market-based approach, and also how to have alternatives to that. And because it's totally linked to colonization. Colonization was the merchandisation of bodies and nature. In the concept of colonization, they have exploited the bodies, the black bodies, but they have also exploited the nature, and they still continue to exploit the nature. I would say also the black bodies for the cheap labor in Africa. They are still using both, and so through corporation and capitalism. So that's and so it has to be addressed and tackled in a way that's how we can preserve our biodiversity. We are at the stage that thousands of species are disappearing of the planet. So it's the urgency also that is behind it. Yeah. So that's all we address in our series of podcasts, and I hope the people that listen us will have the will to listen also to our season.
Yes, I highly recommend it. It was a great introduction. I listened to the season, and it really gives you the full circle of what is around this whole concept and how we move towards solutions. And so I wanted to take a step back, because you started to mention a lot of the corporate side of things in the global north. We're in this very challenging time with the US making its unilateral decisions around aid and that type of thing, which complicates the operations of the development space in general. And so I'm curious about how this is affecting your work and your ability to continue to do the work at the lab at all, or if at all. Have you started to look at different diversification mechanisms for funding and for doing the work that you do? What have been the recent impacts?
I think the main impact is about the fight. It's about
good. I like that.
Seeing our values that are taking a step back with those speech, with the vision and the policy that the Trump administration is putting in place nowadays. They are our values are in danger. If I can say, is what I think. So we are fighting for advanced narratives on reparations, on climate reparations, on gender and racial injustices. All our thematics are now in streets with what's happening today. We see more and more all the things that we are fighting for, and that's movements have been fighting, civil society, grassroots. Our researchers have been fighting for years and years to advance on our progressive ideas, our values of solidarity, and this is just like in one day this nation that is just a step back with this administration, and it's just the beginning of the mandate. What will be the, let's say, the bill at the end of those 4 years? And I think this have an impact on everything, because words are so important. And even if we are working across Europe and Africa. We don't work directly on the US scope, but we are all together. One word, and it impacts at the end. Of course, as you said, fundings of some organizations, but it's just a fight. For me, it's just a fight of ideas. And it's just like, our ideas are really just being pushed back. And that's the pity. That's the problem. At the same time, when you wake up in a world that Trump is putting in place all those policies that are against LGBTQ, against women, against migrants, when you wake up in those worlds, at the same time, you're a bit scared.
Mm.
But at the same time, it gives you motivation for continuing your work. You don't have a better reason to wake up in the morning and do your job. That is fighting for human rights, solidarity, equality, and all those values that are so important for us and for our progressive ideas. So it's just another reason, even more than today. So we continue to fight.
Yeah, it has me thinking about Glocal speak. And so we like to hear what you hear. And so in the context of your industry, I think you started to say a bit of it. What would you say is your Glocal speak in the context of the keywords aimed at moving the reparations agenda forward?
That's an interesting question. First, I think, as you understand, until now, I really work on climate reparation at the lab. As I said before, I think the words that are important is reparations. This word make people scared. It's like a political sensitive topic and a word that is sensitive. And that's important to don't talk only about climate justice, but to talk about climate reparation. And it's important to explain why. And why is just simple. Reparation is a right. If you go to the simple example, but if you go to the garden of your neighbors and you steal everything that is inside, you can put it in front of a court and you can ask reparation. You will have something. Why some countries have done that for centuries. European countries colonizing the rest of the world, coming, plundering all the resources, exploiting the people, killing the people for centuries, and then we should say nothing. How is fine neighbors? We stay good neighbors? No, the word is not like that. So first there is the good word, and reparation is a right. That's what we are fighting for. And I would say that it's complicated to talk about climate reparations. Most of the climate organizations in Africa are funded by the global north, and especially by European international development agencies. So we understand they will not want to bite the end that fits them is complicated. At the same time, we really see also that the movements those climate organizations in Africa receive only micro grants, and there is no one that comes, and that's the way that they how we can say they maintain a hand on it, and it's just giving few micro grants there and there, but not giving like a sufficient money for organization to organize themselves and to, to think differently and to do the thing differently. Everything is this system is also for those global north nation to keep an hand on this sector, if I can say. And then the battle is first there, the first battle of the world. And there is a kind of taboo around the climate reparation. So we have to break this taboo. We have to have constructive conversation. We have to deconstruct the taboo, to have to deconstruct the preconceived ideas that is around it. And to show to the people that are asking reparation is not too strong. It's not something radical. It's a right. And it's not something unimaginable. It's possible. And it's possible soon. So it's also those kind of thing. And in terms of, on our side, we have also the loss and damage. That is important to explain what it is. And that's also where the language is important. We are not facing droughts, floods, hurricane, like that. There was loss and damages, and there is loss and damages initially that have this consequence of climate change and climate crisis today. So I think the language is there to put the right words and also to try, unfortunately, to fight against the influence of the global north in the climate action globally, in the climate response globally, and to have an African-led response solutions for the climate crisis in Africa, because it's still in the interest of the global north. The response that we have today. I mean, I'm taking examples really simple about coal baths or lithium that now they are all pushing to pass to electric cars, but all of this needs resources that we find mainly only in Africa. So those this extractive economy, this extraction of resources comes also with human rights violations on the continent. So it's also always in the sense of in the global north lens that the climate crisis is addressed today at the international level. And this is something we're fighting for, like for Africa to own and take the lead on their solution for the continent.
Yeah. Whew, that's heavy work.
Yes.
And I feel like you've described a lot of the types of mindset hacks that are necessary for us to get there. And so that leads me to my question about what the mindset hacks are that would allow for the recommendations that you're proposing to be implemented. And I'll just read them very quickly so that everyone kind of gets a sense of what were the recommendations so that we can understand. So the first one is decolonize international climate politics. And so new wording, as you mentioned, around reparations and accountability. Empowering affected communities. So a holistic understanding of the lived realities of loss and damage and climate injustice shaped by the collaboration and research with grassroots communities. And liberating the LDF. So that's Loss and Damage Fund. So that's an international fund. So we need an LDF that can extricate itself from the colonial logic at the very foundation of its existence. Yes. And the final one is building a coordinated alliance that participates in key decision-making, shares best practices, integrates influential leaders from all types of sectors. So important, because I was thinking about all the sectors that are necessary to make these things work. All of that in mind, mindset hacks. What is at the crux of these recommendations moving to the next level and engaging with, as you mentioned, it's Africa that has to be the engine for all of this?
I would say that the first step would be to radically transform the global institutions and global systems that is around climate justice. So to decolonize this international system politics, that's the first thing. What can happen to push that? I think it's climate litigation. There is more and more cases that go in front of courts. Of course. There is more and more NGOs that help vulnerable communities, indigenous communities, to raise cases in front of courts about all those practices that we see until today, to grab land and making signed contracts to indigenous communities that don't even read and understand the language and take their land for the next 500 years. And, those kind of things are still happening today. And to put those affected communities at the center of the response. But for that, I will say that we need first to transform the system, to decolonize the system. When we arrive there, put at the center the affected communities. And this, I think the influence of courts can, at one moment, influence states and governments to adopt this, or to enter into this conversation, and to just to be obliged to answer differently. Because when we talk about liberate the Loss and Damage Fund, so this fund has been created by the UNFCCC in the response of the loss and all the loss and damage that the countries in the global south have seen. And this fund is still under operationalizations, but still there is still conversation that took place, and for the moment it's not yet finalized, the operationalization of the fund, but still there is already some decision that are taken about this fund, and for the moment it's not satisfactory at all, because in this fund they are talking about loans not grants. They are not targeting the corporations. There is no guarantee of cease of the ongoing harms. All of this, that no apologize. So if it's just another way to have just loans with conditions for the global South states, is not what what we need when we talk about loss and damage. And we need really to go further on that. But I think that the fact that this fund is also under the hat of the World Bank, since those institutions are not transformed radically, decolonized radically, we cannot really expect much advance on those topics. And it's exactly the same things that when we see about the carbon market, that is like presented as the solutions of the climate crisis. The carbon market is just the capitalization of the carbon emission,
again.
But it's not the solution, you know.
Right.
And now you have countries, African countries that go at COPs and that are signing deals about carbon market, and that's supposed to be the answer to the climate crisis. No. And they are trying to do the same with the nature to create a kind of carbon bio market on the financialization of the nature. Like it's something we address in one of our podcasts with our guest Megna Abraham. She was explaining to us that they are talking about this in the financialization of nature, and basically a company that is destroying. I don't know. She was taking the example of Nigeria and Congo, a company that is destroying forest in Congo. But will have the right to destroy this forest in Congo, but will pay for the conservation of a forest in Nigeria. This is making no sense. Still, the community affected by the destruction of its forest in Congo, they are still affected. And just because you pay is just a right to destroy, to pollute, because you pay. And it's exactly the same with the carbon markets. And that's disappointing. And nowadays with this capitalism system, we have the impression that all the problem of the world, they come with a market approach response.
Yes.
And that's
always. That's our challenge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's our challenge.
Yeah.
Demarketize. That is the legacy of colonization, and it is the definition of capitalism.
Definitely. And decolonize before.
Yes, first, exactly. Going back to that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for all of this insight, because this is the activism that I just hope that I can impart to my audience to really think borderlessly, because we have to figure this out as a people, particularly in Africa. And so I always like to ask, are you a reader? Are you a watcher? Are you a listener? And what are some of your favorite reads, watches, or listens?
What I listen, what I read, I mean, I'm going to give you a recommendation that are related to climate reparations, because most of the time I'm also
I know,
just reading and trying to increase my knowledge on this topic, because it's the one I'm working with, but I'm also just passionate with. I can recommend there is first a newsletter from the REDD Monitor, that's REDD, and then Monitor. Is really analyzing the news in the lens of climate justice. So if you want to keep an eye on what is going on today, and with this analysis of climate justice is really interesting. Then the thing that I can advise also is more to look at some organizations and see what they do, because they always publish resources, reports, articles, or webinar videos. And the one I can advise is the loss and damage collaborations. They are really great. They have really this sense of addressing the loss and damage and the climate justice, and in the way of the decolonization, in the way of the global South perspective. So that's also really interesting. We have everything that is related to the international law framework. I advise to check what CIEL do. CIEL is the Center for International environmental law, and they create a lot of knowledge on this. And we had even one online debate with Joey Shortberry that she's working at CL, and we did an online debate with her. She was explaining so well and so clearly legal aspect that can be so complex sometimes. So I really advise you to follow this organization and see what they publish from time to time. And then I can advise also to watch and read everything that is from Farana Sultana, that she's really specialized in decolonizing climate coloniality. That's really the decolonization of climate sector, if I can say, or climate change, climate issue. She's really an expert on that, and she's also I would say a superstar in this. She's She's in a lot of podcasts, webinars. You can listen her for a bit everywhere. She's really great. They have a lot of writings that you can read, and that's already really interesting on the decoloniality of climate, and green coloniality, what it is.
Nice. This is a great reading list. We're going to have very rich show notes, folks, and you are going to know all that you need to know about this topic. So as we're drawing to a close in our conversation, Hélène, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share in terms of what's new and next, in terms of what you see as the future of this work? Please share.
I have hope. I don't want to... If I'm here, it's because I have hope. It's true that sometimes I was asking myself if we were living in a world where everyone was treated equally, a fair world, what kind of job will I do? I will not be working in this. If there is no racial discrimination or injustices, there is no job in this. So I'm sometimes thinking if we would be in a perfect world, what I would do. But for the moment, we are not in this perfect world. Far from that, but there is still many fights to do, and I think there is enough for one life at least. So I want to give hope. That's why my last message would be this. And when we see the young generation, when we see, for example, the Gen Z fight in Kenya last year, and I think that nowadays we have young people that really want more, that are eager for change, and that's where my hope is. And I really believe and I really hope that the next generations, that they will change this world maybe more radically than before, because the mindset is changing and we are not accepting anymore injustices. And that's important. So that will be my final word. Okay, let's believe in the young people. Let's empower the young people, and
build
let's
them up.
Exactly, and let's continue the fight, and let's hope. Never stop to hope. That's the most important.
Yes. Wonderful.
Change.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, Glocal citizens, that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend. It really matters. And we're talking about things that I hope really do matter to you and your communities. And we're in times where it really is about engaging in activism. That is the nature of being a global citizen. That is the nature of being a citizen of the world. And so I just encourage you to check the show notes, read up, understand more, get involved. And until next time, bye for now.